Well, good morning. I want to start a new series of lessons this morning from the Gospel of Matthew. And I've kind of entitled this Back to Basics, Jesus' Sermons in Matthew's Gospel. Matthew and Mark are known as synoptic Gospels. Matthew is actually even more compact than Mark. And the difference is that Matthew has these 5 sermons interspersed in his gospel, and I wanted to take a look at those with you over the next 5 weeks. Today, I want to look at the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. I know that some of you will remember that I have taught an entire class on the Beatitudes alone, which are, just those first 10 or 12 verses there. And my intent here, though, is not to get lost in the trees, but to kind of take a big fly at high altitude view of these things, and so that we can get a kind of look at the basic terrain of Jesus' spirituality and know what the big issues are. One of the problems, one of the ways that spirituality gets distorted is that we don't keep the main things, and we can sometimes major on the minor. And so today I want to fly high across the text of Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And I would encourage all of us to go home and read all of these sermons with increasing care as the weeks progress. The Sermon on the Mount this morning, the basics of the spiritual life. Basics of the spiritual life. Next week, I'll speak from Matthew 10, the missional discourse, and I'll talk about the basics of sharing the good news. And in Matthew 13, the parabolic discourse, or the sermons by the sea, I'll talk about basic kingdom openness. And then in Matthew 18, the discourse on the church, I'll talk about the basics of church relations. And then in Matthew 23 through 25, the discourse from Mount Olive, or the Olivet discourse, I'll talk about the basic kinds of readiness that we need in the Christian life. Today, the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5:1 reads, "Now when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside and sat down, and his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they'll inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they'll be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.'" Jesus starts out this sermon by telling this ragtag bunch up there on the hill in Galilee, boy, you all are blessed. Obviously the Beatitudes recommend certain moral dispositions, but the essence of them is to understand that Jesus is telling these people, most of whom I'm assuming are not, the power brokers in Israel and with the Roman regime, right? telling this ragtag bunch that are following him up this mountain, you all are blessed. That's just who you are. You're blessed. When you think you can't do anything and have no resources, you're poor in spirit, you're still blessed. And when you mourn the state of the world and your failures disappoint you, guess what? Still blessed. Mm-hmm. And when you remain meek in a me-first world, right? In a nice guys finished last world, you're still blessed, right? And when you're full of mercy, when the bulk of people protect themselves from difficult others, and when you refuse to hedge your bets and don't follow the world in seeking wealth and beauty and fame and power and safety and security and comfort, your relationship with God is still intact, right? You're still blessed. You can leave all of that stuff up to Him. And when all of that seems to get you nowhere in the world's pecking order, say it with me, you're still blessed, yeah? And you're blessed even when people persecute you, yeah? And your lack of worldly success and things not just clicking, you know, when you're not setting any trends. You know, I've often wondered, I've often dreamt, I'll confess, what it would be to be a trendsetter. But Jesus is, you know, obviously He wants you to be humble. Obviously He wants you to be meek and all of those things, right? But His main message is whether you're persecuted or not, you're blessed. Blessed are you when you're persecuted. Join the crowd, and it's a pretty august crowd, right? So it doesn't say, be blessed. It says, you are blessed. It doesn't say in the next verses, doesn't say, you ought to be the salt of the earth. Try hard to work up some saltiness. That's not what it says. Blessed are you, right? You're the salt of the earth, verse 13. If the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Oh, are you with me here? It doesn't say be light. It says you are light. I would say 20 or 30 years ago, now I compared, you know, Christian people and churches to those Christmas decorations that they put out in the yards, you know, the little snowman and inside that guy is in that plastic snowman or whatever, there's a big light that just makes the whole thing shine, right? That's you. There's something, church, inside of you that is the very light of the world. Now, when these people hear that kind of language, Jesus' audience hear that kind of language up on the top of the mountain, what do they think? They think, yes, here's another mountain. Here we are. We're the light of the world. Mount Zion, right? Perfect in beauty, had always shined forth. But here, Jesus is saying, really, you are now that holy temple in which the light of God resides, and you are to bring about the saving influence, not only for Israel, but ultimately all of creation. Receive this kingdom of blessedness. Receive your beatitude with gratitude. Yeah? That's it. That's point one. That's how this whole thing, this whole sermon starts. Receive your identity, receive your blessedness, your beatitude with gratitude. And then the sermon turns at verse 17, 5:17. Don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to kind of complete them, to fill them out. Yeah. So once you understand that you are blessed by the grace gift of God, once you get that, once you accept that the kingdom of God has come in Jesus Christ and that He's pronounced a blessing on you and you have received that blessing, then it might occur to you to think that Jesus has come to abolish the law or the prophets. You might come to think that Jesus has just come to abolish all the moral code and simply declare everybody blessed already. Yeah? You catch it? You catch the logic of it? And Jesus says, no. I've not come to abolish the law. I've come to fill it up. I've come to complete it. And the completeness that Jesus is talking about, this fulfilling of Old Testament teaching, time and time again drives us to examine the righteousness of relationships. Righteousness is a relational concept. It's about making relationships, maintaining relationships, keeping them right. And that kind of completeness that Jesus visualizes knows that not only are we called not to kill people, you've heard it said, right? Don't be murdering people, right? Not only are we not supposed to kill people, but what? We're not supposed to let these contentions rise in our heart. We don't, harbor inward enmity towards others either. And so we need to practice consistently. And I need to practice consistently these practices of reconciliation, which settle matters quickly. Are you with me here this morning? I suppose there are times when there's just not time to do it. But we need to do it quickly. Don't let hard feelings stew, right? And so these reconciling practices, they kind of sound like this. I'm sorry, or that hurts me, or I don't mean that, or I didn't know, or how can I make it up to you? Or a whole host of other things that you might imagine. But those practices are what maintains righteousness, what maintains right relations, right? Whether you're talking about right relation with God or with others or with creation. The teaching on adultery and divorce in basic kinds of ways is saying that we need to treat others as people, not as means to an end. The logic of all this is you don't treat people as if they're means to an end. We're not to use people for our own gratification as if they were a disposable non-person. Even if you make it all legal and sign all the divorce decrees, right? No. Jesus says, righteousness requires more than merely making things legal. We need to place other people's feelings above our own. Everybody's hearts matter. And so we have to keep our promises, right? I mean, that's in some ways what he's getting at when he's saying, let your yes be yes, and don't even bother taking oaths, right? In other words, don't depend on some formal agreement in order to make you keep your promises. I mean, some vows we take in a formal way, or they used to in Israel, to take formal vows, and you really had to fulfill those vows, right? But don't depend on that kind of outward structure to make you keep promises. Just keep promises, right? Really love everybody and want to be faithful to your responsibilities to others. And our obligations to others don't just end simply because we don't like others, right? Occasionally we'll have people who are irritated with us in the community or in the workplace. Are you with me here? They might even be qualified as an enemy. Sometimes people can really get mad at you if you're trying to do good a lot. In other words, turn the cheek. Go the extra mile, right? If he wants your jacket, give him your underwear too. That's what it says. In other words, just resist evil by not resisting evil. Yeah? I mean, he's not saying, Jesus is not saying, well, you just really need to like these people. I don't think that's what he's saying at all. He's saying, love them. Do good for them. Do more than they even ask. Pray for them. Love doesn't mean we like them, but it does require us to love even the enemy. So go out of your way for those who find yourself, go out of the way for those that you find yourself just not really liking that much for some reason or another. Pray for those who hurt you and yours. I don't know about you, but this year, for the first time in probably 20 years, I've experienced somebody in the community for which I have a hard time cultivating any good feelings. Right? Basic kind of spiritual issue here is, am I praying for that person? Am I trying to do good for that person? Am I doing my best to make life better for that person or not? So, receive the kingdom with gratitude. Receive your beatitude with gratitude. Point 2 is maintain righteousness. Seek righteousness. Seek to maintain relationships in a right way. Third, maintain a clear and secure sense of self. That's a big part of the Sermon on the Mount. Maintain a clear and secure sense of yourself. Chapter 6 in verse 1 makes a significant turn again. There's just a kind of shift in the way things are happening in the text when Jesus says, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them." Now that, of course, is in great tension with the verse I read earlier, right? "In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven," right? Here Jesus says something different because he's addressing a different kind of issue. "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets." And he goes on. The point I think Jesus is making, of course, is not to say, never let anybody catch you doing anything good. Bobby, I saw you doing something good. You should have been doing that in secret. That's not the point. The point is, you need to protect yourself from the temptation to build a sense of self upon the approval that we might feel from others. Are you with me here? You need to have some sense that you're loved and valuable without constantly seeking affirmation. Watch yourself about showing off, right? And so Jesus says, don't show off during prayer. Don't be babbling on and making a big speech. Keep it simple. Keep it down to the simple things, the basic matters. Hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done. Give us today daily bread. Give us what we need, Lord. Forgive us our debts. Help us forgive. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Simple, basic kinds of things that we need to seek God's assistance with all the time. Same way with fasting, right? Yeah, the New Testament teaches the practice of fasting, but when you are fasting, don't be doing it to show off. When the church is doing it collectively for some reason, to prevail on God and to cultivate a sense of receptiveness to God's work, fine. But when you're doing it for personal reasons, you can just kind of be discreet about that. Because we don't want you to be tempted to show off. Of course, one of the chief ways people show off is amassing wealth. Yeah? We usually don't even think of it as showing off. Most of us, myself included, I confess to you, I'm embarrassed about my big old rusty holy truck. My truck is not holy, it's just holes, got full of holes. We usually don't even think of that kind of thing, but I know that this is a real issue for me because I'm kind of embarrassed about my ugly old truck. You know, it kind of looks like a Fred Sanford truck. And I just don't like that, you know. And half the time I've got everything under the world, under creation just thrown in the back of it, and I look like some hillbilly here. And I guess I sort of am. I just kind of need to own it. Nothing against hillbillies. I guess I am one. But you understand what I'm talking about. We want to put our best foot forward. We want to entertain. And I'm just not going to get in the weeds here this morning. I'm not going to do it trying to parse when all of this stuff crosses the line. But what I am going to tell you this morning is that you have to know where the line is for you. When you got an eye on people's approval and an eye on money, then your whole vision will be blind. And if your eyes are blind, then the whole body becomes blind. Jesus says the insecure self may worry about reputation and need for approval and acceptance, particularly among the wrong crowd. But the insecure self may forget that he or she is blessed and worry about money. Some people, have a relationship with money that's about showing off. Other people have a relationship with money that's scared to death that they're not going to have what they need. Yeah? In which case, money is not so much a matter of gaining respect as it is a matter of just trying to feel safe in a world that's fraught with danger, right? Ron acknowledged how vulnerable we are in the world this morning in his prayer. There's a kind of security or feeling of safety that people derive from having stuff, right? And I'm not just talking about the people that hoard lots of stuff. I'm talking the people like me who don't want to throw keepsakes away because I think I can hold on to my life somehow by holding on to the memory, right? That there's something about that helps me hold on to my life, but I can't hold on to my life. I have to hold on to Jesus, right? There's a difference. When we lose sight of our beatitude, we can try to feel better about life by also comparing ourselves to others. And that's when you start criticizing everybody, judging everybody. Of course, there's judgment to be made, right? In the sense of moral judgments to be made. I need to know what's right and wrong, right? It's wrong to steal. I shouldn't be coveting things that don't belong to me. I shouldn't be jealous of somebody else having something that I don't have, right? Those kinds of things. I ought to know that that's the case. When we let our identity in Christ slip, and when we're feeling kind of low about who we are, that's when we might slip into some kind of critical and judgmental attitudes. We can see our good intentions, but we see what everybody else does wrong. We may be unable to see the log in our own eye while we judge and criticize the speck in others, and when we lose sight of our beatitude, we can try to feel better about life by comparing ourselves to others. Or maybe we do that and we think we're not comparing very well and we end up in great despair and discouragement. At chapter 7 and verse 6, there's a little saying that is stuck in there that a lot of times just doesn't get treated very much at all, but the connection, again, has to do with this business of your sense of self and how you try to cope with how you think you're all right. Jesus says, don't give to dogs what's sacred. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. The connection, I think, is that while some people feel good about themselves by comparing themselves favorably to others, other people want so desperately to have somebody else's approval that they'll just give their whole lives and their everything that's precious to them to somebody who's not worthy of their attention. They're so codependent and needy that they'll let the other person just walk right over them and not pay attention to all the good things that they're trying to give them. Right? I think that's there too. And then finally, this morning, as we fly past these great rich fields of wisdom, I want to suggest that Jesus is teaching us to cultivate an open and receptive heart. Receive the kingdom of blessedness. Pursue righteousness and maintaining righteousness in relationships. Maintain a healthy sense of self that comes from God alone. And then cultivate this open heart. The open heart is a seeking heart. Chapter 7, verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Isn't this comforting? That what I really need the most is something that God freely gives. Just kind of let that ruminate for a second. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. And he who seeks finds. And to him who knocks, the door will be opened. This openness to God, this willingness to seek God, if we know, though we are wicked, how to give good gifts to our kids, how much more, right? Does God know how to give good gifts to us? So then we can be confident that God will teach us and form us all as we open our hearts to Him, as we seek Him, as we invite Him, as we ask and long for the good things of God. If you want to be spiritually great, you can be. Ask, and it'll be given to you. There's no impediments. That grace is there. Whatever the impediment is, it's not as great as God's loving heart. The open heart is also wary of people who claim to know God but don't do anything objectively good. Are you with me? There are a lot of people, I think they're well-meaning, who get lost in the weeds of this sermon, or more often get lost in the weeds of some other place in the Bible. They kind of leave these alone. It's kind of hard to be legalistic about this one. The commands are just so demanding. But there are those who think that religion is just kind of the kind of thing of saying, Lord, Lord, the right way on Sunday morning. Or saying, Lord, Lord, the correct way. But then they never get around to doing anything objectively good for anybody. It's a kind of mutual reinforcing talk. They feel good about themselves because they're right and everybody's... We exist because they're wrong and we're... And my bet is the fruit of that is division. Division, division. Because unless I line up with everything Bobby thinks, by their fruits you will know them. If they create 24 different divisions of the churches of Christ, you can step back and say, I don't think this is the fruit that Jesus intended. So it's not necessarily the hyper-religious who are doing good. It's actually the people who get around to doing it, right? Are you with me? Isn't this why the way Jesus ends? Therefore, verse 24, 7:24, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. Yes? You know, one of the gaping holes in my spirituality is, you know, I'm just one of these guys who likes to study. And there is an ever-present temptation to think, if you think the thought, that you've lived the life. I don't think I'm the only one, because, you know, over the 30 or 40 years I've been preaching, people will come back and they will say, boy, that was a really interesting sermon. Well, there's nothing wrong with something being interesting. I hope that sermons are interesting. I hope that I'm not boring people to death all the time. There's no virtue in being boring, yes? But where the rubber meets the road is, are we going to do anything about it? And so often, church, I confess to you that I think the thought, I read the text, I understand what it's saying, and yet I've got the next thing to do, and I don't get around to doing it. Now, to be like Jesus is to act on what it is that we know. The seeking heart, the open heart says, okay, this is God's will. I have to do it now. That all of the other urgent things are probably not as important as me doing the important thing. The open heart, when it's convicted, does something about it soon. It tries to love having accepted this blessed identity in Christ. The man who has received the kingdom likewise mends relationships, treats people like they're people, not customers or playthings. He loves them, even loves his enemies and prays for them. He's not insecure trying to impress, or insecure trying to hoard, or insecure trying to be busy judging and criticizing and comparing. He's seeking and knocking, rather. Being open to the next form of love God is leading him or her to. And so hope gives you this basic agenda for spiritual life, for spiritual formation. Jesus is saying, receive the kingdom with gratitude. Don't try to be blessed. Accept the gift of your blessing in whatever circumstances you find yourself. Do maintenance work on your relationships. Make sure things are right. Cultivate a healthy sense of your own blessedness with God so that you don't fall prey to attention-seeking and acquisitiveness and worrying about money and focusing on money and becoming dark. And finally, cultivate and open your heart so that you're actually seeking God, asking God, and then doing what it is that you know you ought to do. Yeah? Those are the big issues that Jesus says are basic spiritual issues. So, I think what I'm going to do this week is I'm going to make those headings, and then I'm just going to search my own life for how well I'm doing in those areas with those kinds of disciplines. And I recommend that you do that too. The good news today is Jesus loves to bless. And he has said to those of us who believe in him, who are following him, who've managed to just come up to the mountain with him, and he says to us, you are blessed, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Don't put a bowl over that light. Really engage in these disciplines and bless the world, because you are You are the blessing that the world needs. Receive that kingdom. Maintain relationships, maintain a sense of self, and do what it is that you know that God is leading you to do as we stand.